Thank you. Yes, I have written this paper with Pekka Virtanen from University of Jyväskylä, Finland. And this paper is a preliminary attempt to provide a mapping of climate change-related development policy practices in 3 countries of Ghana, Mozambique and Tanzania. As a tentative study of broader research project, the study is not based on field studies but on the documents and relevant literature. The starting point of the paper is that new global climate change policy create new development practices, which are here called post-national practices. The term post-national refers to the global development which suggests to the diminishing role of the state owing to marketization and increasing global regulation. In developing countries, this has meant privatization, marketization, and a change in the role of government from an authority to a facilitator. The question which proposed itself is, what are the forms how post-national condition appears in the development policy practices in the domain where global rulemaking and particular administrative procedures of climate change mitigation practices already exist. The paper focuses on the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change Initiative, reducing emission from deforestation and forest degradation. The acronym is REDD. The idea of REDD is to assign a financial value for carbon store in the forest by offering financial initiative to developing countries for reducing the emissions that result from the clearing of forest. The funding of these in these initiatives have included traditional development grants and market-based and market-linked mechanism. The building up functioning carbon system in REDD address to emerging post-national practices in these REDD schemes. The term of practice is a crucial concept here. In social sciences, there is a lot of discussion from dealing from the shift from linguistic term to practical term. Accordingly, practice is a competent performance which requires background knowledge with shared understanding and a community which shares these practices. The view of practice as a routine activity rather than a consciously chosen activity emphasizes that practice does not focus on the intention of actors but on the actions as such. There are in global development and climate policy established practice which limit more concrete practice. These practices are called here procedural practice. In climate change and development issues, one important principle, common but differentiated responsibilities function as a procedural practice of REDD. Assuring, for example, the voluntary nature and the sovereignty in decision making in REDD projects. When we are approaching more concrete level, next practicing are anchoring practices which connect global practices to more specific national practices. In this paper, we focus on these procedural practices of REDD and what are the possible anchoring practices, referring to national condition or Ghana, Mozambique, and Tanzania. The RED pilot project are the mixture of different development policy and global climate change mitigation practices added with conservation practices. What make it national practices are global primary market-based carbon trade practices which have been developed in the context of the United Nations Framework Convention and particularly in clean development mechanisms. These form one part of anchoring practices of RED. The other anchoring RED practices may refer to conservation practices and sustainable forest management, poverty reduction, to emphasize of local and indigenous people's rights and different kind of governance practices such as a participation of civil society. In the discussion in different conferences of the parties in United Nations Framework Convention, different kind of clean development, carbon trade practices and related procedures of land use change and forestry stand out in relief. These are central for estimating the financial value for carbon stored in the given forest, including this system, including the system of quantifying carbon assets, which can proceed to final phase where development countries pay developing countries for carbon offset for their standing forests. The important anchoring practice seems to be very technical, and they are connected to monitoring, reporting and verification of carbon assets. They include additionality, which requires to establish national baseline rates. The second strongly constitutional practice is leakage, which address to the danger that forest conservation in one place may lead to forest loss in another place. Permanency refers to the fact that mitigation measures such as national carbon trade mechanism must have such an established institutional basis that sustainable mitigation is possible. Finally, cost-effective monitoring of emissions is necessary for any mitigation processes. How these practices have been applied in these three countries in national coordination or in different pilot programs. The answer in this stage is only tentative, owing to the lack of proper field studies. The answers quoted here are based on documents and research literature. Very important document here is the Tanzanian draft national RED strategy, and similar draft has been made also in Mozambique, but it has not been in public dissemination, and we would not use it. The Tanzania's draft strategy proved that apparently technical monitoring, reporting and verification practices turned to be very political, emphasizing government's authority in arranging the institution of carbon trade. The other procedural aspect of arranging RED governance, such as arranging private sector and civil society is surprisingly weak. The strong grip of the government dominates the red practices also in the Mozambique and Ghana. In Mozambique, the pattern reminds somehow to that of Tanzania, referring apparently same kind of history of one-party system. However, Mozambican system is characterized by leading power elites' strong involvement in carbon business. The idea that global rulemaking restricts the power of national government is misleading in all these three cases. First of all three countries can take advantage of two anchoring practices of United Nations Framework Convention: leakage and sovereignty. Only a central authority can calculate the baseline and monitor the developments concerning the baseline with relative efficiently. These arrangements may take place following the traditional models of state authority, of neoliberal model of the state as a facilitator where private business organization control the implementation of governance. In both settings, the state power is enforced by the United Nations Framework Convention's emphasis on sovereignty, which gives to the respective governments the agency of arranging, monitoring, reporting and verification governance. According to this study's tentative map, post-national practices reinforce the role of governments, which is in contrast with the established interpretation of post-national situation. This situation seems to be similar regardless its role is compared to the civil society or to private sector. The present state of red processes leaves open many issues of climate change governance, but proves the unexpected nature of post-national governance, which emphasizes that mixture of old and new practices does not necessarily create hybrids, but may lead back to old practices, even in their more intensive forms. Thank you.